But anyways, coming back to my intro. So I was a PM at Meta until November. And then before that, I was at Mixpanel, Up and BlackRock. So my work experience is kind of varied across tech, fintech, just pure finance, etc. On the personal front, I'm a mom to a 20-month-old. It's a lot of work, but also a lot of fun. I'm always researching nutrition and how food can heal. That's like a big obsession for me. I'm watching Succession on HBO right now. I just finished watching The White Lotus. Really enjoyed those. So if y'all haven't seen those shows, really, really recommend go check it out. Next slide. All right, let's just dive into the meat of this discussion. So again, I am glad that we're just like very few people. So let's keep this tight. Let's keep this really, really informal. I want this to be more about your questions and we can really have a very productive discussion. This doesn't have to be like me telling you what to do. So this is your safe space. Feel free to raise your hand and ask me a question while I'm going through this content. But spotlighting on PM interviews, I always like to tell people this is really a game of resilience. This is a game of how badly you want it. Practice is kind of your best friend as you go through these interviews, as you might already know, but it's really about resilience. So if you're at that point of giving up, do not, because that offer might just be around the corner. This is really, really about your grit. And again, like I said, how badly you really want this. So we'll talk through kind of some things that happen through PM interviews. I'm sure some of this you already know, but it might just still help to reaffirm what are the standard things that happen through all of this. Like I said, if there's a question, you disagree with something, please raise your hand. Let's talk through that. Next slide. So starting with getting calls, I think the one thing, there's actually no one thing that helps. You just have to go full force in all directions. Resume, as we all know, is very important, but again, do not plan to spend too much time on your resume. Kyoko, you mentioned like not probably, people around you not having the perception of you not being very technical. At a interviewing stage, I think one thing you can always do is have a section called tools and technologies and really highlight everything that you're very comfortable with, whether that is building ML models, or if you really understand machine learning measurement strategies, or if you actually have dabbled with a programming language, you can always like highlight those kind of things in your resume. But again, do not spend more than 3 days on a resume. Have some people in your network review it for you. Try to find like directors, previous managers, people who are in more senior product positions, see if they can actually give you good feedback on your resume. Again, don't spend more than 3 days. This is just a communication tool. Don't stress about, I don't have the best resume. I know people who spend months on resumes and that's absolutely not required. LinkedIn is really the new resume. So while applying on job boards is really important, a lot of people notice that they get calls on LinkedIn. A lot of it is inbound, assuming again that you have a really well updated LinkedIn profile. Just throwing your job titles and where you work, unfortunately, is no longer enough. So throw in as much information that you can about what products have you launched, what impact has it made to the company bottom line. Even if you don't have numbers, have a way to explain to people on LinkedIn what product you launched and why has that been so important to your customer and your company. Don't be passive on LinkedIn, where don't just like wait for hiring managers and recruiters to reach out to you. If you see an interesting role at a company, if you can just go do some cold reach out, like for example, if I want to interview for Quora, if I'm just going to type who's the head of product at Quora, write them in a mail. At the very worst, they're not going to respond. That's about it. But 50% of the times, hiring managers do actually respond to LinkedIn and mails. You'd be surprised as hard is it on, to be on the other side and be interviewing and feeling like the market is flooded. Even for people who are on the hiring committee, they are also struggling to hire good PMs. That's what I'm hearing from hiring managers, that it is extremely difficult to hire right now. So reach out to hiring managers and recruiters. Everyone already says this enough, but leverage your network. It does help. However, it is not just all about your network. going on company websites and applying on job boards works. I think so far, all my job changes that I've managed have all been me applying on the job board. None of them actually have been me asking someone in my network to refer me in their company. So you never know. So you really need to go all force in and just like try every avenue out there. Next slide. The interview process. I think we all know this is pretty standard. It starts with a recruiter screen. A week later, you're speaking to the hiring manager. You'll do a hiring manager screen. They typically, the most popular question I've heard in both the recruiter screen and hiring manager screen is, talk to me about your most recent product that you launched. And they're really trying to see if at the very least, do you understand all the basic rhythms and the beats that a product manager needs to hit to take a product from 0 to 1. And can you work with an engineering team? Like, what kind of cross-functional stakeholders are you used to working with? A lot of companies now are doing a product case. A product case could take the shape of just a product sense interview that you do live. That could be like, talk to me about a favorite product, or how would you improve Uber? What's the next product that company XYZ could build? It could either be that, or it could literally be a problem that a company recently solved. They might just again throw that at you to say, like I said, what should company XYZ build? And then they want you to put together some slides at an on-site, present in front of a panel. So that's a bit of a work, but again, can be very satisfying by the end of it. And then on top of that, there is obviously the virtual on-site with your stakeholders. So meeting like 4 or 5 people at the company, having conversations. This is also a great time for you to figure out if this would be a good fit for you or not. Next slide. Specifically, like if we had to just go deeper into like the more product management interviews, I've seen these types of interviews happening in the order of what is most popular. So typically, if you're interviewing at a startup, they will stop with the first 2. There will definitely be a lot of behavioral, maybe a product sense, and you're perhaps at an offer stage. The more, I think, big tech-ish a company gets, the more and more of these rounds that you see. Like Google probably does all 7 of what I have on my screen right now. So a behavioral is again most popular, a product sense interview, followed by a case or a presentation that you present in front of a panel. Product execution, these are, and we'll see more details about these interview types, but a product execution is typically like, hey, I am the product manager on Lyft and I'm suddenly seeing the number of rides drop. What do you think happened? How would you go about diagnosing that problem? Or I am a PM on Instagram, or you are a PM, sorry, on Instagram stories. What kind of goals or success metrics would you define for Instagram stories? Or it could be a trade-off question. So to say, you are a PM on Instagram stories and you have the choice to keep stories running for 24 hours versus 48 hours. How would you make a decision? And they really want to see your decision-making skills. Your analytical mindset is what they're really testing you. Strategy, system design, and estimation is something that you probably won't see as much. If you're interviewing for very, very senior roles, like an IC6 or above, then you're probably going to see some strategy rounds. Fewer companies like Google and Stripe are now doing system design interviews. And then there's hardly anyone asks estimation product question. I have never, ever done an estimation question, I think, in all my time of interviewing for PM roles. Full disclaimer, I have never even done a system design interview. So that's something that I even personally want to work on. Like the next time I want to interview for a fairly technical product, Stripe, for example, system design would be something that you definitely want to brush up upon, and it might need some work. I actually have a post on LinkedIn where there are more details about each of these rounds if you are curious. But really, like I said, the thing with product management interviews is just practice, practice, practice. It can take someone 3 interviews, it can take someone 50 interviews, it can take someone 80 interviews. You're going to get there. It's that game of resilience. You keep doing it. Eventually, you're going to get to a spot where you're going to know what is the right thing to say. What is it that my interviewer wants to hear? You're going to start figuring that out for yourself and find someone to practice with. I'll talk through like some of the resources that you can use for practicing. Next slide. I think there's someone in the waiting room, Karen, actually, if you want to let them in. So a behavioral interview. These are some typical questions that get asked, starting with, talk to me about a project that you're proud of. How do you handle feedback, negative feedback that a stakeholder shared with you? What was the last time you had a conflict? What was the last time you lost a negotiation? Tell me about a time you had to get scrappy. So these questions are going to make you uncomfortable. No one is going to, very rarely someone's going to ask you to talk to me about your strength. They're going to ask you to talk to me about your weaknesses. So this is a good opportunity to be vulnerable, show your empathy, but at the same time, display your good communication skills, your good leadership skills, show some humility, grit, show that you're good with like the people stuff, influencing without authority. Like this is your time to shine. Come up with good stories. The way I would do this, I spent a week, I call it the reflection week. And I have a Google Doc in which I would literally start writing 1 or 2 examples for each of these questions. And by the end of the week, you're going to have a solid script ready that you can use for your interviews. It's never going to be perfect. I think it's good to always once in 2 weeks revisit that script and see that, hey, does this still sound very good, or is there a different story that I want to pull out? But always have some stories written out. Don't think like you will be able to speak through all that stuff in an interview. Writing things down in a structured manner really helps when you say it in an interview. So really, really consider. So I think the Cracking the PM interview book talks about the STAR framework. Some people don't like that. I really love it. So situation, task, action, result. Use that framework. Or if there is another framework that you really like to structure your stories for behavioral interviews, do that. But highly, highly recommend writing down your stories in a Google Doc, in a notebook, whatever that works for you. Next. All right, the most dreaded product sense. So I know, Sakshi, you mentioned that, this is where you're struggling the most. This is where most PMs struggle the most. This is where I struggle the most. But why don't we do this? So for this specific one, let's try to go through an example, and we'll do this together. So let's say you're a PM at Spotify. What would you build to help artists to engage directly with their listeners? Let's say this is an example question. What I would love for you to do is take this question after we are all done with this and try to practice using the structure that I'm sharing here. So I think a classic misconception is that there might be something on an interviewer's mind which they are hoping to hear from a candidate. That's actually not true. A lot of the times, this is the ugly truth, not a lot of interviewers have sometimes thought through some of these questions themselves. They're probably running in from different meetings and just about squeezed in an hour to come interview you. So I think what really helps is if you can keep them engaged as you're talking through these questions. Interviewers don't want to do a whole lot of work. They don't want to be there to lead you, to give you a structure, to tell you what to do next. Think of this like your opportunity to really put together a show in front of an interviewer. I am the interviewer. I'm just going to sit back and relax. You're going to lead this whole case for me end to end. As a PM at Spotify, what would you build to help artists to engage directly with their listeners? Imagine someone's just like sitting back and you are driving like a good 40 minutes of that interview by yourself. And helping the interviewer understand that this person has really good communication skills. They have a structured thinking and approach. They're very concise. They don't ramble. I can easily follow through their thought process. There is no right answer here, but what they're looking for is that structure. So how do you nail that structure? Start with repeating the problem statement back to the interviewer so that you and they are on the same page and you both establish, yes, we both understand this problem statement the same way. And then start going deep into the problem statement. So very clearly write down the assumptions and ask all your clarifying questions. And by the way, my most favorite way to do this is to share a Google Doc with your interviewer, because now we are virtually doing this. Share your screen, put up a Google Doc. Let's say you're interviewing at, I don't know, Facebook, let's just say, call it like Prachi's PM interview for Facebook, and let the interviewer see your Google Doc. That way they can literally watch how you're thinking. In the real world, you would do this on a whiteboard, but clearly write down all the assumptions you're making. A classic mistake that people make is they ask the interviewer, hey, what assumptions should I make? Or, should this be only for users in the US? Don't ask them. Let them know that that's an assumption you're making. Hey, I am building for all the artists and listeners who are based out of the US. For so and so reason, I'm actually leaving out the global audience. Are you aligned with that? And I think that's a much better way that shows that this person can come in, take ownership, make decisions, really lead a group. So just put all that right in front, set up some context, talk to them about the mission of the company or the product. So what is Spotify? What is their mission? What are they doing? What do people really love about them? What is it that people don't like about them? The best that you know at that stage. You can also, by the way, use the interviewer to ask questions about the product. For some, like Spotify is a fairly popular product. So if you were literally like, I don't know what Spotify is, that probably speaks a little poorly of you. That probably tells me that as a PM, you're not really tuned in and you're not, aware of like the most popular products that a typical consumer might be heavily using. But if there was like a B2B product that you don't know about much, feel free to use the interviewer to understand what that product is, restate it back to them. Okay, here's what I understand this product is all about. The meat of these interviews is really, does this person do a good job of defining the users, segmenting those users? And for each of those segments, can you really go over what the motivations are? So be really good about spending at least a good 10 minutes on, here are the users. I'm breaking them down by either a demography or some kind of a way, maybe age is what you use to break down those users. Also pick a user segment. Don't try to build for all the users. Once you have picked a user, spend another 5 to 10 minutes to go through the user pain points. Again, this is really the meat of this interview. How much time did you spend talking through the pain points? Are you able to prioritize through those pain points to then start thinking through solutions? Solutions, also a great solution that I think works really well for interviewers is one that's very high level at the beginning, where you can really paint a vision of what would in an ideal world a solution look like. But then you also understand that resources are limited, time is limited. So you prioritize and you pare it down to an MVP to say that here are the milestones 1, 2, 3. Let's focus on milestone 1. Milestone 1 would be my minimum viable product. Again, a classic mistake that I've seen people make is not feel comfortable pulling up a pen and a paper. Again, in the virtual case, take a notebook, use a pen, draw a wireframe, pull it up on your screen and show it. Again, even if the interviewer doesn't follow it through, they will appreciate the effort you made where you took a minute to draw things out and show to them. That says that you can visualize a customer journey and you can walk someone through a customer journey. A bonus would be to, okay, so sorry, I'll take that back. Defining success metrics is primary, but then if you can add some counter metrics, that's really good. So how do you know this product is going to be successful? Pick on a metric. Don't at a very high level say engagement. Like maybe in case of Spotify, if increase in the number of, don't just again like signups, if that makes sense, and maybe signups, but the number of active listeners, where an active listener is someone who listened to at least 3 tracks in a day. If that metric was going up, then that would be a good success metric for this product. A counter metric could perhaps be something like the quality of the content. Did we actually deteriorate the quality of the actual content that is on Spotify by building the XYZ feature that we build? Another like a pro tip is if you can think through some risks So by building this product or by prioritizing this feature, here are the risks that I'm taking. Here are the other things that I'm not solving for, but I'm fully aware that I'm taking these risks. I still think this is kind of the more important thing to go after. So have a way to justify every decision that you're making along the way. That way, again, the interviewer is like really following through why you made a certain decision and why. And then put a bow on the whole thing, summarize the entire thing by the end of it. And again, you are the one who has to manage your time. Typically, these interviews are 45 minutes, 5 minutes go in like intros and things like that. You also want to leave 5 minutes at the end to ask questions. So you have to practice to know that you can go through this entire flow in 35 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes close. Again, I have written a post on LinkedIn, and that does a much better job, I feel, in terms of like specific tips on tackling the PM product science interview. But if you have more questions, if this was not very helpful, if there are areas that you still need some more help with, let's use our Q&A today, or outside of that, happy to talk. Next slide. Product execution. I won't spend too much time on it, but product execution questions, like I said before, are primarily 4 types. One is like goal setting. You are the PM of Instagram. What kind of goals would you set for the next 6 months? Or you're the PM for Lyft driver or rider experience. There's been a sudden rise in the number of rides. How would you diagnose that? Or sudden, usually it's a drop that they want to diagnose. Trade-offs. So over 24 hours versus 48 hours, what would you choose for Instagram stories? Why? And then a lot of companies, especially like startups, they really go for the core PM skills. So they again want to behavioral style. They want to hear your stories on how do you prioritize and how do you put together a roadmap and strategy, PRDs, how you put together metrics, how have you launched a product? So what is your process before you are going to launch something? Those are the kind of things they want to learn through. So those questions might, again, feel a little behavioral kinds. I'll share this deck with everyone, but what I've essentially done is I've linked a few resources on YouTube. There are lots of good YouTube videos to learn from. So I have linked the 3 that helped me a ton. But again, one thing that I would really warn everyone is watch YouTube videos, but don't make that the be all end all of your preparation. It's really important to practice, like literally do this. Get on a camera, get a friend. I know you're probably going to think this friend is going to think I'm stupid, but really role play. Get a coworker. The best thing about getting laid off, your previous coworkers have a lot of empathy for you. Ask a ex-coworker, would you mind getting like 30 minutes with me? I want to do a mock interview, and have them give you feedback. So watch these videos to kind of understand how to do this, but don't just keep watching videos. Make sure that you are also practicing. Next slide. Product case. Again, I won't spend too much time. I've shared an example deck, something that I had to go through in one of the interviews. I interviewed for a self-driving car company called Nuro, and they wanted me to basically tell them, like whatever they've done so far is great. What should they go do next? And this is essentially giving the panel an idea of what might it look like to work with you in the real world. Don't resist and resent this step in the interview process. It really helps you to flex your strategy muscle, I feel. I was someone who, like, this was a pet peeve. I would be like, why is this company asking me to do this product case? They're actually a lot of fun. Because it really forces you to think, especially when you don't know anything about that company. You don't work there, so there is only so much knowledge you have. So this, again, beyond flexing your strategy muscle, also displays how well can this person do in, with ambiguity, with like just knowing very little information. How confident do they feel to put together a proposal? So feel free to take a look at that example that I shared afterwards. Yeah, next slide. And then some favorite resources. Like I said, this is all about practice. If you're looking for a set of questions, Lewis Lynn will have a spreadsheet, I believe. So I think his website then links to a spreadsheet that has a list of questions. There is a website called Daily Product Prep. There's Try Exponent. I really love Decode and Conquer and Cracking the PM Interview, but the once if you've gotten past those two books, I think Decode and Conquer is really good. But once you get past those, there is also the Product Manager Interview by Lewis Lynn. Pretty good books. If you are focusing your search on the big tech, and you don't mind spending some money in like actually coaching where people take your mock interviews and then they also give you some very good actionable feedback. These are usually paid services. I'm linking the one that I'm aware of and which I have personally used a couple of years ago and was really helpful. It's called interviews.tech. So yeah, if you're going for a big tech, consider investing in something like that. If it's not a big tech, probably don't stress. The rest might work. Having said that, if you are, if you just want to go through something like interviews.tech, I think it was around $200 for doing like a product sense or a product execution. It's still very, very helpful, especially in this market. So if you don't mind making that investment, it's a paid service, but helpful. Next. All right, we are really coming to the end of this. So again, overall tips and strategies for every interview that you're going in, prepare questions to ask. Very, very important. Like I said, for a product sense, product execution, or any kind of interview, share your screen, have the interviewer see how you're thinking. Make it really easy for an interviewer to evaluate you. Don't make it difficult. This is someone who's probably really hustling through their day, struggling to find a conference room, has just about settled in their spot, probably late in an interview. So make it really easy. Have, make sure that they are also having a good time as they get to speak to you. Be curious. I think that's the number one tip. That probably put this like a note on your screen somewhere on your monitor. Just be curious, because I think if you continue to stay curious through an interview, you will never feel nervous. So this is the number one thing that helps with nervousness. Be curious, ask questions. If something is not clear, ask questions. Again, that's a great trait to highlight, that you don't get afraid to ask questions and you don't make assumptions without asking good clarifying questions. Stay authentic to yourself as you're going through the process. Really be yourself, be your own person, and let that shine and reflect through some of these stories that we were talking about in terms of how do you deal with a conflict and how do you work with a difficult coworker. What is it that gets you excited? What is it that you are looking for in your career? I think spending some time reflecting as you're going through interview processes is very important. Have a checklist of what are the things that are important to you in a job. And it's really okay to do that. I know the market is intense and you're probably thinking, why is she saying that? There are too many candidates, but it's really okay to be selective, and it's important that you're choosy. But overall, above all of this, enjoy the process. Even if you don't get that job offer, you have guaranteed learned something either about yourself or a new company or a new product as you go through that process. So just plan to have a good time. And make sure your interviewer, like I said, even they have a good time meeting with you. There are so many companies I interviewed for where I didn't land up like getting an offer, but the people that I met through the process, just because we had a good time, we like kept in touch on LinkedIn, things like these happen. So very strangely, this is an easy way to network and grow your presence across the tech community. So it's really important to have a good time and just like really enjoy the process and just feel good about yourself. You're doing something that's very difficult. So pat on the back. Interviewing is hard. And then PM interviews are 10x hard. So you're committed and signed up to something that is very hard. So don't beat yourself up. Just feel good by the end of the day and enjoy yourself. And I think that's all. The next slide is really just for you to ask me any questions. So I'm going to stop, and I really want to encourage questions because I'm pretty sure I didn't cover it all. So why don't we just hand it over to all of y'all to now ask me questions and let's have a discussion.